All right, it is 7 o'clock, folks. We're going to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. And we do have a packed agenda tonight. We have a lot of work being presented by both the elementary and secondary task forces. Without further ado, I'm going to kind of run through the initial part here, and then we'll get right into it with those folks. So, board norms, let's start with that. So we have maintain our focus, communicate respectfully, be present, keep the board productive and effective, and respect the agenda. Those are our board norms. Correspondence, we did have some correspondence that is in reference to tonight's meeting. That will be logged into our correspondence. So that's great. And then members of the public. So folks, we have a packed agenda tonight with the presentations. There'll be time within those presentations for when they report out, and then we'll have clarifying questions, and then board discussion, as well as we can obviously have some input from folks in the audience. And then also we will talk about community feedback sessions, which will happen, we're hoping, for later in the month of June. So with that, I am going to, I'm going to hand it over to Les, our facilitator, and the ball is yours, sir.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick comments before we jump into the report. On everyone's behalf, I want to thank the members of the elementary and secondary task forces. There were about 20 folks who volunteered to take this on, and they've met a half dozen times between April and tonight in order to review all the information that's been collected in the past and to respond to some of the questions and charges that the board gave them, to pull together information that will be helpful to the board in making this decision. So they've worked really hard at this. You didn't go out and hire an organizational consulting firm or a PR firm. These are your community members who worked pretty long and hard, and I think we all owe them a vote of thanks. So just in advance, so thank you. The task force reports drew on the work that's been done previously by the Future Planning Subcommittee, received a lot of support from the administration, from Superintendent Anton and his team, and from our building leadership here in the district, and put together the presentations that you'll hear tonight. The board will not be voting to make any decisions tonight. This is really to inform the board of the status of the work. And the next step is going to be to go back out to the community to present the same information to the community, get feedback from community members, and then over the summer and the July and August meetings, the board will be coming to some decisions and ultimately making some budget recommendations for FY24 as we move into the fall. We have a lot of work to do tonight. We've asked each of the task forces to do a presentation that'll run about 20 minutes. Then there'll be about 10 minutes for clarifying questions for the members of the task force, and then another 20 minutes for discussion. It's probably not going to be possible tonight to hear everything and from everyone. So if you don't get a chance to share your questions tonight, we're going to ask that you share that with Leanne Gilson and with Crystal Corvo, who will then make sure that other members of the task force and the rest of the board get that information. Please forgive me in advance if I'm facilitating with a little heavier hand tonight, but I want to get everybody home before midnight. We're going to start tonight with the secondary task force. Bob, are you going to lead that off for us?
I'm going to try. right. Bear with me here. Just getting this up better on my machine for viewing purposes. All right. So I will speak mostly, I think, for the secondary task force. And for those who don't know me, I'm Bob Tebow. I'm the principal here at Leland and Gray, and just wrapping up my 6th year as principal. And I'm happy to, somebody got mute there.
Yeah.
I'm happy to present for our group. Our charge, as we understood it, based on the documents we received, was to create this committee, this task force, which would describe our existing course options, identify the potential for expanded opportunities, examine the fiscal impact of school choice, and examine the impact of school choice on members of the community. So that's hopefully what we were able to do. Jumping in a little bit more, before we jump in, we're going to talk a little bit more where we are as far as our existing offerings, and talk a little bit about what those are. All right, so just a little bit of a lag here, apparently. Oh, there we go. So obviously that's a very full slide. We didn't want to drag this out with a bunch of different slides, but we wanted to try to show sort of in one quick picture of what might not be heard. Well,
I'm just going to move the mic over here just
Sure.
so
Yep.
we're close to you. Sorry about that.
to identify the course offerings that we have here at the high school. And again, this is all, everything that we're talking about today is really just about the high school, despite the fact that we are a 6 through 12 institution, because that's the charge of the school choice element of this. So we're really focusing on the high school. So these are the courses that we offer, and a little bit about the depth of things that we have in all the areas. People, I think the board, I've sent this to you very late notice, but sent this to you in PDF as well, so you should have that, and that can get put up, I guess, on the website later on. Just a couple of quick highlights I wanted to say a little bit about here. One of the things that's new for us for next year is the way we're offering our English classes. I said the traditional English 9, English 10, English 11, so on and so forth. We now have groups of clusters, 9, 10 clusters, and 11, 12 clusters with a variety of offerings really designed around literature and journalism. And those are available for kids to take sort of what they want, so that we could get more interest for kids represented. This is something we've been planning since the fall. So I want to mention that. One other thing I want to mention is that you're going to be, through our probability and statistics class, you're going to see some of their actual work later in the presentation, and I'll be sure to highlight that. And I wanted to also talk a little bit about our technology program, just to quickly highlight that we have, in that one classroom for that one teacher, we have really a lab setting where all students are in there doing independent studies with the teacher. And I'm going to talk more about how that connects to what our future looks like, we hope. But that's one thing I wanted to highlight as well. We have another class, just to mention, in social studies that is going to be new this coming year, which is based on a project-based model, which is a cultural studies course on England that our students are going to be planning, designing, and then traveling.
That's a rough party.
Oh, that's all done.
I think that was Charlie in the background there.
Yeah.
Hey, Charlie. And then traveling to England is part of this, but the students themselves will be planning this. And just a quick couple things about science. We have a very cool astronomy program that had we had some grant money that we used a couple years ago to purchase some solar telescopes and things like that are new and creative. So in our world languages, in our Chinese program this year, we had our Chinese teacher do some reach out with a sister school in China to kind of get our students relating to them and having some conversations back and forth. So just some cool stuff that I wanted to highlight. We have, for existing currently in our co-curricular programming, we have drama, athletics, and music. And you can see the different options that we have there. And I think people know really about our drama program. It's been around for 25 years or so and been pretty successful. And a sports program, obviously, is something that brings a lot of the community together. And our music program, I believe, through the work that they've done as well, have been able to highlight some of the, particularly coming out of COVID, some improvements there that we, weren't sure how that was going to play out with COVID. Just a couple of quick graphs of some of our participation in activities, co-curricular activities by season. You can see the first year of COVID, there was no spring sports. They were all canceled. That's why that is kind of truncated there. But basically, this is the number of participants. So a student could be represented multiple times, which is why those numbers are, in some cases, higher than our enrollment. But you can see that we've had pretty good participation over the years. In fact, you can see that of our students, you can see the numbers that participate in multiple different activities, and obviously we have some that don't do anything. But nearly 60% participate in at least one. We have a pretty thorough winter activities program. We're one of the few remaining high schools, I think, in Southern Vermont, certainly public high schools in Southern Vermont, to do this. With a variety, I think there's 11 different options that we've had, including obviously Stratton being the big one, but others that we've brought along as well, including some new ones that come and go. Cornhole is the latest fad to strike Leland and Gray.
No league yet?
What's that?
No league yet?
Well, it hasn't been sanctioned by the VPA yet. We'll wait for that. I think if they do, we'll be putting a banner on the wall. So then just a quick thing about work-based learning and senior survival. At Wednesday's board meeting, Terry Davidson-Berger is going to be here. She's here now. Hi, Terry. She's going to be here Wednesday to present a little bit about what she does and all the different elements of that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but you can see some of the key elements that go along with those two programs that sort of work together. And I'll surprise you. Well, most surprise. I won't say the surprise till Wednesday, but Terry was just named as the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation P3 Partner of the Year for the work that she's done. It's the first time they're awarding it, and I went to Terry. So, it's amazing how much we take advantage of the work that the partnerships with BDCC. And we've been told by them, and this is not disparaging any other school, but we've been told by them that we do it significantly more than any other school in Windham County. So that is pretty cool. Of course, most people know about Journey East, which has been a program that we've had here for over 20 years. Obviously, it's been on hiatus for the last couple of years with travel restrictions. But we have recently, through the board's agreement, to bring on a new director and try to find some financial stability for that program to exist into the future, because we are struggling with that financially. And we did hire a person to take that on, and she's very excited to jump in and get going with that. We also have some other programs that are pretty cool. This was featured in the Reformer the other day. The home students, home program built a handmade umiak. You can see them in it. It is floating. So that was a success. And they do a lot of other really cool experiential learning opportunities. There's down picture playing with a forge and doing some camping experiences. Another thing about Leland and Gray is that we do a lot of connections with our community. And here we go. So just in the last several months, these are a couple of the things that have happened. We had our second annual Dingers for Dylan, which is a fundraiser to support the Landers family and scholarship fund.
Well, I still got the sound.
Working good on our end. All right. Our NHS students did a cookie bake for the Townsend Food Shelf. We had a bunch of sophomores that put together goodie bags for the Valley Cares residents and did some work on their lawn. And of course, we've had students involved with our distribution of COVID vaccines and the use of the school to be a spot to do that for the whole community. So lots of ways that we interact with the community in our current form. There we go. A couple of things that are also relatively new to us. One of the things I'd like to quickly highlight is that through COVID, it led us to, instead of having students or staff even do announcements over the morning, over the PA, they now do them over Zoom to all the classrooms. And we've set up a little video editing and broadcasting lab in the tech room, and our students, usually seniors, but sometimes they bring middle school kids in to do it and learn how to do that, which is very cool for everybody in the morning. Our ropes course, which is relatively new, built a year and a half ago or so. No, last spring it was built. And then some mountain bikes we got for our PE program through another grant, like the telescope. So some really cool things that are new to us that we're still trying to, to get students to engage with, and but we think are going to be really powerful learning experiences for kids. Again, the lag. Does the lag count as part of my 20 minutes less? Well, the next slide has some lovely pictures of students who are doing internships with our IT department. We have some middle school students that are rebuilding machines, designing systems on CAD, and Peter was just telling me today about a couple of a student that's going to be building a supercomputer out of some used Chromebook parts, and see if they can figure out how to put that together. These are all middle school kids. That's kind of a cool thing. All right, so we really want to talk about what's the possible expansion from here. So I'm going to just move on. So one of the things that the board has heard last month was a presentation on PBL, which is project-based learning, and this is really for us what we're using as our springboard moving forward. And this is a method of teaching in which students gain knowledge and skills by really investigating and exploring things through an inquiry model and solving a problem or answering a question. And this is it's a program that a lot of schools and teachers have done really in spaces around, but we're trying to do it more globally for all students. And this, you guys will remember this slide, but it basically talks about the elements of project-based learning and why we'd want to do that. Lots of choice and voice for kids. Well, as we also know, the state wanted us to think about personalized learning with Act 77 passing several years ago. And so for us, and this is going to be the slide that blows your mind maybe, for us, what we were hoping to do is illustrate for you here how through multiple content areas and even habits of learning, which is HOL, how you can take 5 different projects and you have to kind of follow the little colored scheme, which doesn't really show up super well, but you can see how through 5 different projects, how all 5 of these are the standards for each of these content areas are met without really taking a class in that discipline per se. So the idea is that this is really limitless in how kids can access curriculum points, the standards, and this really is what I envision to be the future of very highly personalized, project-based experiences for kids that make us incredibly unique. So that was sort of the looking forward piece, and really using the proficiencies, the PBGRs, plus PBL equals personalization. So I know I'm going quickly, but the lag time's taking up my time here. These are just a few shots of our current PBL projects that we've been doing. And you can see that even though these are not yet embedded in academic areas or embedded in academic standards, what we're using right now are the transferable skills, you can imagine just by looking at these topics how you could and where those could go. And so just to kind of take a quick peek, we have a climate change in the ski industry, cooking and baking, game design, and one working on refreshing the co-curriculars. This was from the fall where they wanted to create a coffee cart, which I'm now told their project involved building one next door, which I'm told there is a coffee shop going in next door. So I don't know. I don't think we had anything to do with that, but it's kind of cool anyways. All right, so this gets into sort of the meat of what I think the community wants to hear and what you guys want to hear about. What's the impact of high school choice? We've talked about where we are and where we want to go, but what are the impacts? What would be the implications for us? Well, first of all, we wanted to define choice a little bit because there's a lot of misconceptions around what school choice means. And what some people don't realize is that we already have high school choice at Leland and Gray. And so this side explains a little bit about that. Any of our students can apply to any public school in the state of Vermont. Transportation is on their own, and acceptance is based on the receiving school's capacity. If it's above what their capacity is, if the number of applicants they get, then they have a lottery system, which can be used. So we have a handful of students that go. I think we maybe have 4 or 5 total right now who are through all 4 years of high school at some other school, mostly Brattleboro. And we have students that choice in to us the same way, probably about equal numbers, typically more from the Athens-Grafton area. There's no money that's connected to this. The only time money is connected is if the student is on an IEP, and special education money would follow that. So this already exists. So I want people to understand this before we talk about what the other option is, because students right now have a certain amount of choice. The tuition town status is really, I think, what people are thinking about when they say school choice. And this is a different animal. So Wardsboro, Dover, Marlboro all have some version of this. None of those towns have existing high schools, so they all send their kids to other places. The tuition money can go to any high school that will accept the student, and that includes private schools, parochial schools. Those schools have to, if they're private, obviously have to accept the student in order for the student to go there and the tuition money to go as well. But they can go to any high school that they want to, including Leland and Gray. A district can decide to designate a particular high school or allow for open choice. Those are two different ways that a board could go down that road if you chose to go that way. You can designate one, like we are gonna have choice, we're gonna have tuitioning, but we're gonna tuition our kids to a designated high school, whichever one we pick. Or we can leave it more open. Those towns that I've mentioned above have open, they don't designate. All right. So yeah, and then the districts at that point can decide on what they're going to do as far as transportation. You could offer it, you could not offer it. Transportation is not a requirement under statute, even here, right now. Most schools obviously do it. It's the right thing to do from an equity standpoint, but it's not something that you have to do. And if you had it open, you'd have to figure out, are you sending buses in all these different directions? Are you designating one direction that you're going and letting the other ones, I shouldn't say the word designate, that's confusing, but you could pick one where most kids go and then not transport the other way. So you would have choices on how you want to do that. All right, so that's the transportation piece. So that's sort of the differences between what we're talking about. And obviously this side, we're not really focusing on the purposes of this discussion. We're really talking about the side on the right, because that involves the idea of closing Leland and Gray and having high school students go elsewhere. All right. All right. So a couple of things we just wanted to highlight. We wanted to compare ourselves to some of the regional schools. And I apologize, so we're going to do this a couple times with different charts. And some of the schools are different in each chart. And it all depends on what information we could get. All right. But the thing that's the same, I think, in most of them, there might be one, is that we kept it public. We did not get into the privates because we felt that was a pretty different animal. But you can see how some of the numbers compare and what the offerings are for sports, theater, music, honor societies, and activities and clubs. And you can see there's some obvious differences with bigger schools versus the smaller schools, which are similar to us, and then some that are more in the middle. But you can get a sense of how we compare with our offerings. One thing that you won't get from that, though, is the participation rate of our students in our co-curriculars. And Tammy put out a request to some regional schools to send us information on what their participation rates were. And we didn't get, like, for example, Brattleboro's not up here. We don't know what their rates are. We're not trying to hide it. We just don't know. They didn't respond to that part. And we got some other random schools, White River and Mill River, that aren't really regional, but we included anyways. That's your internet, right? Unstable? Yeah. But you can see that we have a pretty good participation, which is a good thing. Pretty good participation rate as far as our co-curriculars go. Now, I told you I'd come back to the Prob and Stats class. So Mr. Barton's Prob and Stats class did a study on the impact of students who participate in co-curriculars. And they talked about students that have 0 versus 1, 2, and 3 or more co-curriculars that they're involved with. And as you can see, and they tracked this comparatively to the GPAs, and we used a 100-point GPA, even though we don't use that here, to make it simple for those students. But the Stats and Prob class did this data, did the research, plugged it all in, and figured out that you can see the fewer co-curriculars that you have correlates with a decreased GPA. And I tell you this to tell you that one of the things that we talked about in the task force is our concern that if Leland and Gray isn't here, that we'd have decreased numbers of our kids participating in co-curriculars at the schools that they end up at. Okay? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is this slide, which shows the distances. And we did this from the town schools to the other school. So you can see, and I put in bold the next closest school, so you get a sense of, for example, Brookline students would have to travel twice as far to get to the next closest school. And again, this is from Brookline. I'm sure this is based on Brookline's, where the old Brookline school is or was, compared to, so there's people that are going to be out regional on either side, but we had to do an average somehow. And Jamaica, again, the closest, again, from the center of Jamaica to here, again, twice as far to the next school, and so on. So you can kind of get the idea of how far some of these schools would be and what the implications might be for students who are engaging in co-curriculars. Many of those happen after school, directly after school. Some of them happen in the evenings. For example, some of the music ensembles, like madrigals and jazz bands, happen from 7 to 9 at night at BUHS. And so being able to get back down there for 7 and then going back down there at 9, again, unless you want to run multiple late buses and things like that, which are going to increase your costs. Those are all factors. So that's one reason why we might have a decreased participation in co-curriculars if Leland and Gray doesn't exist. And the other reason is one that's not really that enjoyable to talk about, but it's pretty honest in that a lot of our students who participate here in an environment where We don't have cuts in our programs. We don't, we have a smaller pond, if you will, because we're small. A lot of those students might not make those curricular, be able to access those based on skill level. All right. So the equity piece around accessing based on time and distance is one element, but the skill area is another one. And whether kids would be able to get those same roles at the other school they're going to is a question. So.
Folks, can you please mute? Can everybody check to make sure they're muted? Thank you.
All right. Another element that we wanted to do that was specifically asked about was for us to offer some comparisons with other regional schools. And so we went to the Agency of Ed's website, and they assess schools based on these 5 criteria from EQS, from the Education Quality Standards. Academic proficiency, which is, as you might imagine, a bunch of academic testing and college and career readiness rates. Personalization, safe and healthy schools, high quality staffing, and investment priorities. And the investment priorities one is about, it says our school system is providing high quality education at a sustainable cost, per pupil spending, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine probably before we even get into that one, maybe we didn't do so well in. But we want to offer a comparison of how we did to some of these regional schools. And again, these are the public schools. There it is. All right. So you can see the 5 categories here, and some schools are going across. And then we did the Windham County schools, and you can see the Vermont state average. So just to highlight, so academic proficiency, we are not at the standard, but neither is Bells Falls, Twin Valley, or BUHS. In fact, neither is the state. The state average is not at the standard. So we are basically in line with all of our regional schools and with the state. Personalization, we are meeting the standard. You can see some are not meeting, some are exceeding. The state is approaching, so we're above the state average here. And our trajectory, they show you what your rate of change is, and our trajectory is excelling, meaning it's at the fastest increase rate possible. So even if we're not exceeding that standard, we're on an upward trajectory. Safe and healthy schools, you can see that we are exceeding, like most are. High quality staffing, we are exceeding and excelling, meaning we're continuing that trajectory upwards. Whereas some are, but the state level, in fact, is sort of a lower trajectory. And then, of course, there's the investment priorities. So that was, a little spoiler there. We are not meeting that one, and in fact, we're declining because our cost continues to go up, which is no surprise to anybody. You do notice that the state average, however, is also declining. The rate is declining, even though it's meeting the standard. And you see others, there's only one school that is actually meeting it currently, and that one is on a downward trajectory as well. So that's a tough measure, but I didn't want to hold back. That's the reality of where we're at. All right. I don't know where my time is right now, but getting close, but I'm getting there, Les. I'm almost there.
You're doing great, Bob.
Okay.
About 2 or 3 more minutes.
Yeah, we're getting there. All right. So we just want to do a quick, obvious comparison for us is big versus small. Yes, larger schools like BBA and BRAT, we recognize have more course offerings. They have more co-curricular offerings. They have larger social interactions for more diverse groups of kids for our students to access. All true. They also have economies of scale that allow them to be more financially efficient. These things are not surprising, I hope, to anybody around how a big school might operate. The smaller schools, however, and this isn't just us, there's a lot of small schools, can know each student incredibly well. Students know their teachers really well. We can change and evolve really quickly. We're nimble in how we can operate. I believe that allows us to truly personalize experience for kids, like the chart with the lines I showed you a few minutes ago. And it allows, as I said earlier, it allows for more access to co-curriculars for all students without having cuts and those kinds of things. So, it's all about balancing out the pros and cons of what big versus small can do for you. Obviously, we're small, in case you didn't know that. All right, so we start digging into the community implications. We looked at the comments, went through those. There's clearly some comments that highlight the cons to closing Leland and Gray, and then there's some comments that highlight the pros to closing Leland and Gray. And so I just wanted to put them in there. I'm not going to read all of them, but there's clearly some benefits on the choice side, and there's clearly some benefits on the community impact for us, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure there'll be more conversation around that one. One question was, what happens when high schools close? And so what happens to the community if that happens? And unfortunately, there really isn't a lot of data on this out here because it has only happened really once in the last several decades in Vermont. So Black River is the case in point. They are a little bit different than us, so it's hard to really compare. They are in an SU that had an existing high school already in it, Green Mountain High School. They're all in the same merged SU. So that makes us different. We do not have another high school in our SU. And I would make the argument, hopefully no one would disagree with me, that the economic base of Ludlow is maybe a little bit different than the West River Valley, with Okemo right there in the middle of it.
More
So-
like Jamaica though. Ski area, second.
Yeah, more like Stratton maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Dover, but not the same as.
Not Townsend.
Not Townsend,
Brookline, no.
yeah. So just, we wanted to say this out. So Crystal, as a board member, reached out to several different avenues within the Black River community on social media to find out what people think about it. And so you can see some of the comments that they put in. People are not feeling generally very good about that. Yeah, I'm not gonna read all those, but the travel element was brought up in sports and late nights and things like that, so. All right, getting there, all right. So the last piece really is about, so we've said all sort of the pluses and minuses of what's available, what it would look like. What does it mean fiscally for us, which is the question I think a lot of people wanna know. Well, I sat with Lori Garland and we crunched some numbers. These are the assumptions that we used, and I want to make sure everyone understands the assumptions because it's going to be very important when you understand the final number. We used the statewide average for tuition, all right? We didn't pick Brattleboro, we didn't pick Burnburn, we didn't pick any, we just used the statewide average, and that way it's an average, okay? So there's some wiggle room there. We increased transportation by 10%. I think that's a very conservative increase. I think it depends on what you'd want to do for buses and how many and how often and where you're sending them to. Are you going in two different directions? Are you going in one direction? So 10% might look conservative. We reduced 27.8 FTE of teachers, 1 administrator, and 1 custodian to basically try to show like how much of the people were really focused on high school and how much were left based on middle school. I will say this, the challenge to that is a lot of people are part high school and part middle school. And so you end up with, I'm just gonna pick, the Spanish teacher is 2/3 high school, 1/3 middle school, based on how we divide and pull apart that money based on what he does. So if you reduced 2/3 of him, you might, I could make the argument, I think pretty successfully, is you might jeopardize the availability to actually run Spanish in the middle school because the 1/3 position is probably not gonna hold a person to a job here. So that's just something to kind of put in your thinking, but that's how we ran those numbers. We also reduced 2/3 of all supplies and equipment because that's generally what the comparison is as far as money from middle to high. And we factored in lost revenue from tuition students coming in. But obviously you have to take off the books on the opposite side. All right, so all that being said, the overall savings was estimated at $4,389. And just to be clear, that's not a per person cost. That's not per student, that's the overall savings of doing this with those assumptions. Again, those could change. They could go up though, could go down. That's 0.03% of the annual school district budget, which again, I didn't ask Lori this specific question, but I'm assuming, and maybe you guys could jump in on that one, there's probably a negligible impact on taxes for $4,000 spread across the whole tax base. That's what we found. That was our study, and there you go. Sorry, I talked really fast, but we're on a time crunch.
That was great. Just out of curiosity, were any of the other folks in the room here a part of the secondary task force? Quite a few.
And there's a few not here as well.
So let's open the floor for questions of the task force. And for the question, let's keep the questions more as clarifying questions. How did this happen? How did you consider this? Did you consider that? Just informational rather than discussion, which we'll get to next. And if we could begin with board members and then open to the community, I think that would be helpful.
So, I'll go first. Bob,
Yeah.
the bus transportation, that was just one-way trip to school and from school.
Yeah, we estimated that there would be a slightly increased distance, so therefore, because we charge by mileage and by hour, so those two factors would maybe bump it 10%. It was really just an estimate. We did not run that by the bus company. That was Lori's estimate. I think it's low personally, but I don't know what the impact of gas prices would have on any of that these days too, so. But certainly any bus contract could be renegotiated based on new stuff too, so.
Or
who
it
knows?
might not be our bus company that we
Right, I
normally
mean-
use. It may be somebody else
Yep.
that might be willing to do those.
Yep. And I think it all, I mean, some of the factors to think about is if you have kids from Newfane that want to go to Burton, and then you have kids from Jamaica that want to go to Brattleboro, you have to maybe have a central place, which would probably be here, to be able to like make the switches and, you know what I mean? So it's not impossible to do, but it's just, it might be more to it than 10%.
Yeah.
And if you want late buses, if you want to run co-curricular ones at 5 or 6 o'clock at night to go back and forth, that's not even included. This is just the daily down and back, or out and back, depending on where you're going.
That's all.
So essentially, at that point, you're at a loss.
Yeah, oh yeah. If you did something like that.
That
yeah.
$4,000 could be chewed up in fuel costs alone.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? No, I think that's probably just a statement of how amazing the presentation was and thorough and.
Thank you for that.
I appreciate it.
I will say the other thing that came out of discussions in the meeting, and you know, a community member wrote a letter to you guys about the committee's makeup, and I can't argue with the makeup. That's what it was. What I will say is that, and that person can speak to this at some point if they chose to, but one thing that was brought up that could be something you guys want to talk about at some point might be, is that if that closing Leland Grade might not be the only way to bring choice to people who want choice. And for example, there was a discussion around whether or not Jamaica remained in the district for the purposes of high school choice. Now that's a complex question. There's a lot of elements that would have to kind of work because it's all part of the union, the high school union. But because I think most of the responses came from Jamaica who wanted choice. And so, and I think the logic there is a lot of families that travel the opposite direction for work and whatever. And so traveling the opposite direction might make sense to them. So that coupled with the bigger school and the increased opportunity, so on and so forth. So that's something I think you guys would want to maybe wrestle with at some point. And again, that's really, it would involve multiple votes and blah, blah, blah to make that happen. And it's pretty complex. But that was one thing that was brought up, that there were people that didn't necessarily want the school to close, but just wanted choice to be offered to certain parts of the existing district. And I just don't know how you do that, but so I want to be fair to that opinion and put it out there to you guys as well.
And these numbers are based on the middle school students staying in this building,
Yeah, all it was about was taking high school out.
just taking the high
And
school.
the staff that went along
out.
with them and so on and so forth, yep.
So that number could drastically change if you went the route of,
You need anything right now?
no, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, Lori did say that that there's no, you know, she said there's no savings in this plan. The savings would be if you closed all the elementary schools and moved K-5 here to put them with the middle school, you could save probably $1 million. That involves votes for every town to close every school to move it here. I don't know, maybe Townsend would be a technicality, maybe they wouldn't have to vote. I don't know, because the school would be in Townsend still. Anyways,
Right.
I'm not sure, there's a lot of complexities to that, but that would get you $1 million out of 13 million savings to move those here. But the political implications of that, but that would be $1 million is what she said.
Right, or even the middle schools wind up moving over to another building and having two elementary schools, or having three.
Yeah, we didn't get into any of that.
Right.
Because that wasn't our purview.
Right.
yeah. But certainly those things could be discussed, yeah.
Al, do you want to coordinate questions from here?
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know if you saw hands first, but let's see. Let's go in the front row and then we'll work our way back. Go ahead.
Me.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I want to thank you for a wonderful, clear presentation. I was the community member in that task force, and it was a struggle to interact with all inside the bubble people. But I think you've done an outstanding job at putting together a very nice presentation, so thank you. Secondly, I have a question of the board through you, I guess, since you're the chair. One of the concerns that has been raised that I think the public needs to hear as the community member on this board, how and when will the board decide, for once and for all, closing or not closing the high school? What's the procedure? What's the process? What's the away.
Be a vote.
Very true. So we have the presentations tonight.
Yeah.
We plan on having community feedback between now and the next long-term planning meeting. And then over the course of the summer, we would make that decision.
So there'll be what I call an open meeting vote of the board? One man, one vote, one woman, one vote? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll, I'm not gonna get into that right now as to the closing of the school or not. But yeah, so we would, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but in August, September-ish.
Yeah, I think
Timeframe.
the goal was to take July and August to solicit feedback from the community or around the reports, to gather some additional information about facilities and whatever else the board felt was necessary, and then come to a decision by September about what models
In
the board wants
response-
to pursue and develop the budget in the next 2 meetings after the FY24 budget.
In response to that comment, I heard the gentleman with the hat, I don't know your name, sir.
Ken McFadden, Newfane.
Thank you. At one time recommend, and I would like to second for the board as a community member, that there be a true vote of the community on that decision, that it not be just a board decision, because there's a lot more to it, as the principal has said. So I'd like you to consider having a official vote of the community, like you vote for anything else,
Al, do you want to give the 5-minute technical version of this? I don't think you
No.
understand exactly what's involved in closing this. If the board were to vote to close the school, and Al, do you want to do this?
No, go ahead, yeah.
If the board were to vote to close the school, all 5 towns would have to agree with that in a separate vote. And there would be a long, drawn-out legal procedure to actually
Do that. That's what I
end
was
the
asking.
union school. This is, our decision wouldn't be, we're gonna close the school, it would be, let's pursue that option. And then there would be a lot to happen after that.
Go ahead.
I just had a question about what's the enrollment in 9 through 12 right now?
Should have had that in the slides.
Well, I wasn't able to
Yeah.
see the,
I think
it was percents across the bottom, right?
I'm gonna say like 170, 180, 160. Somewhere in the 160, 170 range. Peter's nodding. Is that about right? Yeah.
165 is sticking in my mind.
Yeah, that could be. Yep.
And then the other question I had is, if there is a school choice, what if the other schools out there are not able to take the students?
I mean, if you're asking me, I think that would have to be investigated prior to moving in that direction. Yep.
Investigation, I can't remember the gentleman's name over there that was just speaking to that. That would be one of the things. that-
One of the steps you'd have to take is find out.
You have to find
Yeah.
out if they would even accept
Correct.
that many
Yeah.
students.
I mean, my gut tells me that with declining enrollment across the state, there'd be room for our kids somewhere. The question is, would it be in the places they want to be in? That would be the question, so.
And then I have one more question in regards to, how does it compare, moving on to higher education to other schools? How does Leland and Gray compare to that? Did you do anything, did you research any of that?
We did not. That data is much harder to get at, not for us, but for other schools. And so I don't have that information. I would say that over the years, I think there's been from a percentage standpoint, probably a decline. I think I'm not sure what that's attributed to, but one of the things that I will say, there's been conversations in past board meetings, and I keep repeating this because I think it's important. A community member made a comment at one point that we had a 0% college and career placement based on something they saw online somewhere. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So when you take the college and the career placement and throw in the military as well, we place 100% of our students are college and career ready when they leave here. And at graduation, we announce where they're going and what they're doing.
Right, so that they go on to college or
Correct.
military or right into the.
Or directly into the workforce. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, we'll go over to Zoom for a second, and then we'll bounce back.
Richard Burbridge.
Hi. Yeah, you stated that the rankings of the high schools was hard to find. The AOE recently just published a ranking of all the high schools in Vermont. I know Bellows Falls was, I want to say, 17th in the state or so, but those numbers aren't hard to find.
Well, the question was specifically, the question was specifically about college acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Going on to college.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is more of is a broader compilation of data that they use for that larger ranking, I think is what you're looking at. But yeah, she was asking specifically about the college piece.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, Christine Hoskins. Bob, again, I'm going to echo Jean's comments. Thank you for that. That was great. I did attend a couple of their meetings as a member of the public. On the savings that you calculated, that was based on status quo, just moving the 9 through 12 out to tuitioning. Did that include, so I'm guessing that didn't include any deferred maintenance on the existing buildings, capital projects that are coming up, or the cost of any other option that we might consider, such as one campus, going to building a new building, which in the minutes of the secondary committee, it was written down as $50 million approximately.
To build a new building, that was talked about at the board some months ago. But no, but your original question is no. None of those things are included because the 6th, 7th, and 8th would still be here. So they would need to have, so heating costs, things like that would remain exactly the same because there's still students here.
And then no capital projects to take care of all the deferred maintenance.
That part I don't know, but if Lori included that or not, that's a great question. I don't know.
Okay. And then to the board, I wrote the letter that's in your packet. And to follow up on what Joe was saying, with the whole concept of having the public vote on this and how challenging that could be. In my letter, I do recommend a non-binding vote, just so that you can see what the community has to say. So maybe that would make it a little bit easier. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
Is this presentation going to be available to the public and easy to find? Like,
those are two questions.
What's WRED?
The first one's yes. I have already forwarded the PDF version of it to Suzanne. How that gets posted and where it gets posted on that website and how easy it is to find.
because everything right now is really good.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find.
Yeah, if that's the stuff that Suzanne's posted, my guess is this will be the same. Yeah. Yeah.
You'll let us know if it isn't, right, Patty?
I will.
I don't know who was first. Sorry.
My name's Fiona. I live in Newfane. I'm noticing I'm on the elementary committee, and I'm noticing that neither of the committees dealt with the middle school or talked about the middle school, and that for me is a little concerning because that's a part of our district. I would recommend that the board get, like the work that you did with Lori Garland. I would recommend doing that also for if those numbers, because I'm thinking about the community involvement, which I'm going to be running, and the community is going to ask this question. Like, how would the numbers be different if there were two K-8 schools and this whole building was closed? I think that would be really helpful to have those numbers as well.
I mean, the board would have to, the board could ask Lori to get that information. That wasn't part of our charge. It wasn't like we were ducking it, but yeah, I think the board could get that from Lori.
In the charge, it left out the middle school. I think that's something that it would be really helpful to have some sort of information about the middle school by the time there's community discussions, if possible.
I just wanted to know a little bit more information about Jamaica, because I know there's a lot of people in Jamaica specifically that would prefer school choice. It's shorter distance for us to drive to, like, let's say Burton than a lot of people that live farther away. but how many students do you know about, like, that attend high school from Jamaica, or how would that impact, like?
Yeah, I didn't
funding?
draw that out separately. The one thing I will say though, in your question, I would say that for some students, it would be a shorter commute to Burn. For others, it would not be. So if you're asking me how many students live on the side that would be closer, I don't know that at all.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
But yeah, it's a great, I think it's a great question. I would have to, I'd have to dig into that to find out.
Terry?
I'm wondering, I'm not sure how it would be possible, but to try, my major issue would be equity. And I really have a concern about students that live in this district who are in a less favorable situation and how closing the school would impact them. And I don't know how you could try to dive into that by socioeconomic status and that sort of thing, but I really think that, I think it would be eye-opening for some people to see the negative impact of closing the school would have on our less privileged students. And just from a personal standpoint, I currently drive a student to and from school every day because her family does not have transportation. So without me I just happen to live in her general area. So I pick her up, I drive her home, I bring her to extracurricular activities. If I was not doing that, she would not be getting an education currently. So it would be actually impossible for her to get a lift, to catch a bus, to go to BUHS, to go to BBA, to do any of those things. And I, as someone who works in this school, she is not an exception with lack of resources. So if there was any way, and I really don't know how you would do it, but I really think it would be important to figure out how closing the school would impact students with more resources and students with less resources.
The only thing I would add to that is, I'm gonna step away from sort of the unbiased role that I tried to have with the presentation, is that my feeling is, having worked in large and smaller schools, is the thing that you just described doesn't happen in other places.
Right.
It's because we're small, because we know our kids, and because they know us, that those relationships are created where you can make that possible for that kid. So we make differences in kids' lives to a larger degree than larger schools might do. And for the kids who need it the most, those underprivileged students you're talking about.
It was the perfect way to illustrate that, because I have a feeling at some of these schools, the principal, the guidance counselor, and various staff members were not driving around to students' homes 10 miles in the middle of nowhere, checking in on those students to make sure their family had food, they had access to internet, they had what they needed for those students to endure that period of time. And as someone who was in the car with you, driving around out into the hinterlands to where I live, I know that. And there is no doubt that that sort of connection is what kept those kids connected and kept them going until we could be in person again. And I don't think that would be happening in a larger school.
So I think we exhausted questions here, but we're more into the discussion phase of this. So let's just open this up a little bit more for, again, first for our board members and then for our community members. Some of the considerations that seem to be jumping out at you, or any additional information that you might find helpful.
Al, do you have a hand?
We're going to do the board first.
Oh,
so,
okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Does anyone have any information on homeschooling at the secondary level?
Information like what? I mean, how many students are currently doing it?
Yeah, are there a lot
I
of?
think the central office has that information, yeah.
The state has it?
The central office, the
Okay.
superintendent's office has that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be privy to that. We wouldn't know
Oh,
that. I mean, they're kind of homeschool's outside our realm of what we take care of. Once they're done homeschooling, we don't
That's okay, but somebody asked about numbers, and I thought, well, there's a few numbers there too, probably, that get counted or don't get counted.
Sorry, I'll just jump in
No,
on
that's
that
okay.
too, though. We get informed by the state how many kids are approved for homeschool plans.
Yeah.
So with that, we know numbers. A lot of those students end up accessing some element of our curriculum here, whether it's driver's ed, band, or even a one particular class that they want to take. So we do engage with a lot of homeschool families that come here. We don't get to count them. We provide a service and get no reimbursement from the state for that because they're homeschooled, but they have the right, and they even participate in sports as well for socialization. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Anybody else on the board?
I'd like to point out something.
Go ahead.
And it might not go over too well, but it usually doesn't when I bring it up. For the people who were saying about a vote, whether it's binding, not binding, this board didn't have a problem with getting all 5 towns to vote when the year after we started, when we wanted to make sure that we were gonna get Wyndham to see if we could close Wyndham School. All of a sudden, everybody was all gung-ho for having a vote. And we're gonna make it binding to close their school after they voted to have it open. Don't look disillusioned, Joe, you were there. And we all did this, and there was opposite sides saying they already had their vote, we shouldn't be, that was their decision. But everybody wanted to have a 5-town vote like it was nothing. So don't make this out like it's more. If these people want to have a vote, it's possible. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Ken.
I don't think every one of us wanted to have that
No,
vote.
not every one of us did.
Anybody else?
Are we disagreeing about the vote?
It's not on topic.
Just
Yeah,
saying
let's-
it can
let's-
happen. It's not as hard as it sound, as it's being made to sound.
All right, any other discussion points for Bob and or team on the secondary task force?
Couple hands in the room.
Okay, now we can go, if nobody else here. Go ahead, Patty.
I don't think a lot of people want to see Leland and Gray close. I think people want to see change. People want to see dynamic change that will put us on the map, will make people want to buy homes here because they don't. Jamaica, I don't think, sold one home during this whole time, and we're right near Stratton during this whole big selling to families. They all went to Airbnbs or second homeowners. And it was because they don't want their kids in these schools for some reason, and I don't know what it is, but you guys, the administration and the leadership, are the people who should know or should find out and do something. And we will all be behind you. But you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. It just isn't working. And there needs to be discussion, there needs to be time frames, how you're gonna, so that it doesn't just drop. Because I've been on the board when we've gone to retreats and all this stuff we were gonna do. And then I never hear about it again. We never talk about the things again. And that needs to change. Because I don't want to see Leland and Gray close. It's our high school. It's an important part of our community, no more than I want to see Jamaica close. So we have to figure out how to keep these things from happening, because it doesn't make us look good. It makes us look desperate.
Thanks, Patty.
How do we have chat?
There's chat on there?
There's chat on there.
Whoa.
Someone just chatted. It's
Yeah,
gotta
it should be
reply.
disabled.
I think if you click on chat, does it allow you to close it in there?
No one. There we go. Sorry, Luella, you've had your hand up for a long time. Apologies.
No worries. You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, great presentation. I feel so impressed, and I just don't understand why, if that is the story on paper, why the reputation of the school is not at all reflective of that. I mean, that presentation was like, that sounds amazing. What a great place to send my child. But that doesn't seem to be the reputation of the school. And so I don't know how to fix that. That's a big one. But that is, that's clearly something that's needed. I think change is part of it. And I don't know if a school can solve all of society's problems, which it seems like we're trying to have it do, because clearly there are other issues at play here that are affecting the ranking of the school and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a thorny issue. And my other question or consideration is whether or not the health of the existing building was taken into consideration in terms of continuing to use it for a school. Like, is it good for another 50 years or another 20 years? Or are we running out of time in the current facility with the health of the building? Because obviously the land is great, all the outdoor space is great. Sounds like all the teachers are wonderful, and there's so many programs. So obviously losing all of that would be really sad. But if the building itself isn't healthy or isn't sustainable for at least 10 years, then I think that needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Awesome. So let me respond to the first part of the question. I'm going to let Al respond to the building part because it's the board function. But public educators are awful PR people. I think that what you're describing is the challenge is a perception issue. And we talked about it in the task force a little bit, a couple different times, that when people are repeatedly saying, well, Leland and Gray should have a thing where kids can do internships. And we're like, holy moly, we've been doing internships here for 30 plus years through a work-based learning program, or co-op as it was called. Like, it's not new. It's better, it's more improved than it used to be, but like the fact that people don't realize that we already do that, that's a PR problem for us. It's not a programming problem. So I think I appreciate what you're saying, and I think you're right. I think we are on the right path. We are on the trajectory for improvement. I think what I presented about project-based learning and PBGRs and personalization, I think that is the future. And I think for a small school, that is how you get put on the map. But we have to be better at telling people what we're doing. And it's the perception piece that's the challenge. And I'll put Christine on the spot a little bit. As we talked a little bit, she's like, yeah, I just hear things. I'm like, well, what do you hear? She's like, I just hear it's not good. It's like, well, what do you hear? I just hear it's not good. And we kind of went back and forth on this a little bit. And the reality is, like, there wasn't really anything specific. It was just, that's the story. We have to change that story. You're absolutely right. So that's a PR problem, not a programming problem. That's all I want to say.
Seems like the negative voices are sometimes the loudest.
Well, I mean, that's always true, for sure. But I mean, historically, like, we have a Facebook page, and from time to time we put events on. There's 4 or 5 of us that have access to it, but like days and weeks will go by where there's nothing on it. Why? Because we're running around all day. We're doing our jobs, trying to stay busy. And so, we just don't promote ourselves like we could. And I mean, I was kind of teasing Chris a little bit, like Burn Bird, like they have a PR department probably, right? I mean, they got money and endowments. They have to do fundraising. Like places like that, they have people that do this. We just don't do that. It's not what we do, and we're not trained in doing it. So it's a different animal. But I would love it if we could. I think it would really help. And I was talking, I think, with Terry the other day. Maybe it was Terry, about doing some kind of a summer program where we bring in realtors and do basically this presentation for them. This is what we do here, guys. Let them understand the school better, so that when they're selling houses or showing houses to people, and families included, that they can articulate. Well, yeah, I know you've heard you say Leland Gray's a bad school, but actually, here's what they actually do. You know, I think that would really, things like that we could do to really self-promote what we're doing. And then we just need to do it. Like, that's the other part, like the improvements that we talk about, we got to keep working on it. We got to keep doing them. There's always room for more. So that's my soapbox,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, and in terms of that PR and that marketing, that's why we're trying to make our website better. And as you said, Patty, it's easy to find things, right? So if people can find all of that information, it's readily available. That definitely helps craft and mold the story.
And I think you guys also, in your budget, put in some money for stipends for people to do some PR work on social media and such. So that's a small step, but I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction. We talked about that during budget season.
An internship.
What's that?
An internship.
Yeah, to have kids be involved with some of that work,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it would be nice to have people, if there is a problem, we can't fix it if we don't know the exact problem.
Right.
And I hear all bad things, but I see good things coming out. We had a concert the other night. These kids were amazing in coming together with the chorus and the band and the jazz band. And it was amazing in their sports. I mean,
I just want to piggyback on what Dana just said, if you're.
Piggyback.
Something that for the presentation even, the middle high school band and chorus just went to Queensbury, New York. They fundraised, got a bus, went to Queensbury, competed. They got ranked superior in both band and chorus, and then they got to go to Six Flags for the rest of the day. I mean, that's something that this school just did 2 weeks ago, So there's a lot more that people just don't see.
It was awesome.
I know my kid came home psyched.
And if I could just clarify on one thing, part of my charge was to look at the survey and get the information from the Black River District. And I did go through the survey, and people were upset that I didn't add that people wanted choice. It wasn't a matter of, I'm not going to add that. It was a matter of, there was 24 comments that literally just said, we want choice, but it didn't give specifics. So I did document all 24 comments and sent them to Bob so that they could figure out how to put them in the presentation. But it was tough because, even if somebody said, I want choice because that's closer to my job and it'll be easier to get my kids to co-curriculars. But we didn't even get that feedback.
So there are some ideas about how to get some additional information about that, and we'll come back to that a little later in the meeting. Any other discussion points for the board before we move to the elementary?
Yeah,
two people up here still.
Yeah. All right, so let's do Juliet, and then we'll go out to the audience.
Hi, thank you. Just briefly, I wanted to pick up something that Luella said, and also that Dana said about finding out what the problems are, knowing what the problems are. Why does the school have this reputation out in the community, outside of the immediate high school community? And is it really just a branding issue, which sounds good until you Google it? Someone said earlier about that new families aren't moving to Jamaica because of the school district, or that she believes that there's an impression of that. And I think that is true in South Newfane also. We have that problem also. And a large part of what's going on is that when you look at it online, you see a lot of low college readiness scores. You see a lot of low rankings on state testing and a lot of things about bullying, and you don't see personalized education programming and that kind of thing. So some of that is a branding issue, but some of that is also legitimate concerns of families of young kids who have to make educational choices, right? So it's what you're talking about is really wonderful for some people, but it's not necessarily going to fit a lot of people who are looking and considering where to raise their kids. So when we're thinking about the viability of the district going forward, it's important to think about, are we addressing those needs as well? And not just holding really tightly to what we've been doing and saying what we've been doing is really great, but also what are people seeing that they're not pleased with? Someone brought up what are the homeschool families doing? And I think that's a great, how many homeschool families are there? How many families are there that are choicing out
because it's more convenient or they need more academic opportunity or whatever, and talking to those families and finding out more information about how to either get them in the district or what their issues are, because I think that really informs, like really helps flesh out what we're not doing. And by the same token, if we're talking about, we need to be comparing apples to apples. If we're talking about what's the budget, or not budget, but like what would it cost to go to a full school choice model versus what did it cost to run the school last year? That's not necessarily an equal comparison if we're at the same time talking about doing millions and millions of dollars of renovations in order to keep Leland and Gray viable 10, 15 years from now. So I do think that deserves, I've heard a lot of people bring up legitimate concerns that to me sound really relevant and have it just be like, oh yeah, well, we don't know the answer to that and moving on. And I think that's been going on throughout this discussion. It'd be nice to see some forward action on actually addressing those questions so that we can go through this process in a really thoughtful way that makes sure that we're answering all of these questions about what is this going to be like 5 years, 10 years down the road, if that makes sense.
That makes very good sense. And for the July meeting, the administration has been asked to provide a facilities report on all of the buildings that'll give us a better sense of what the capital needs are and sort of what the life expectancy of the buildings may be. And if the information that's in hand is not sufficient, then the board can decide whether they need some further analysis of that.
My recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is when we had the engineer come on to one of our board meetings, we addressed the columns issue, right? And he said that with proper maintenance, this building had a future. Certainly more than 15 years, and so it becomes a question of, do we want to do the maintenance? We have a 250-year-old school building across the street. They take maintenance, but if it's that or a $50 million school that's going to add a couple $1,000s per student to our cost, to me that makes sense to do the maintenance.
So maybe one or two more questions.
Okay, and then we'll
Yeah.
move on. Okay. All right. I'm going to be the bad guy. Let's see. Who has not spoken?
There are people up there that have.
Oh, I don't think we heard
next up
from
was
RL's iPad.
I think Erica was next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good. Thank you, Scotty.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to thank first of all, I wanted to thank all of you for, spending your time doing this. I know that it takes a lot of time to be on a committee, and I appreciate all that you've done. But one thing I was hoping to make sure that everybody in the committee on the school board understands is that there is a very large contingency in the town of Jamaica that is interested in school choice. It is not just a whim, and we did take that survey very seriously. And just to give you an understanding of this, when I think of back to 12 years ago when my daughter was born, and think of the contemporaries that were around her at the time she was born, I actually went through the list and counted 18 students that were her age or were a year older or a year younger from the town of Jamaica that do not attend Leland and Gray. They have either moved out of town in some instances, they are tuitioning into other schools in some instances. In some really crazy situations, some people are even semi-separated so that they can attend other school districts. And it is living separately. It's a real thing. And also what's real is there's also a contingency that is very much in support of Leland and Gray. And so what I'm wondering is if the school board could please help us figure out how to solve this problem, because it is something that a very large percentage of people, at least in my direct life, are faced with. And they live and I think this is just speaking from my perspective of a mother of a 12-year-old in my town. So I don't know what's going on in the other towns. Is there a way that the school boards can assist this contingency in figuring out how can we change districts like it was mentioned before? How can we solve this problem for all of us? And I just want to also mention that I actually do think that the homeschool groups are important here, because those are people that are choosing to, just like people that are choosing to send their kids to another school, maybe a private school, they're choosing to keep their kids home and educate them out of this school. And so, like one of the speakers mentioned, we should really, really figure out what the reasons are, not only for the embetterment of Leland and Gray, but for solving this problem. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Erica. Let's see. RL's iPad and then Heather, and I think we probably have to cut it off, right? Yeah.
There, Rachel here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just thought I'd actually just address everyone saying they don't know why Leland and Gray has a bad rap, or do you need better PR? Is it branding? I'm also in Jamaica. I also have a 12-year-old, and I can be very blunt and plain spoken and say, I do not want my kid to go based on something I just saw in the chart, which I've been aware of. I've been living here for quite some time, which is the academic proficiency. It's not a small thing that the academics are not where they, from my perspective, where they should be. And that we have schools that are simply not approaching, as the lingo went, but academic excellence is more in the, is more where they're at, which is to say Burton, which many in Jamaica are interested in. And it really, I don't understand what's the problem when on your own chart, it's not even proficient academically. That's a really crucial point that needs to be heard. Yes, there are other schools in that same boat, but there's also other schools that are not in that boat. And I would like my kid to get a super excellent education, as many others do. And that really counts. And so we would really like school choice here in Jamaica, many of us. And also, thank you. I do also thank you for all the time and effort you all put into this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Heather?
Everyone. My comment actually has to do with when the conversation was talking about the ability to bring new families into our district. And I just wanted to mention that we are in a housing, serious housing crisis right now. And, housing prices are through the roof. When we talk about housing being given over to Airbnbs or second homes, it's really because, working families have been priced out of that market. And even families who are looking to rent can't find rentals in our area. We're losing students. I know at least one of my students has to move this year because the landlord is selling the house and they can't find housing. They love this area. They have to move. They're moving to Keene. So I think until we also know this is a hard thing to do and we can't solve this, but I think we need to work together as a community to also have more affordable housing available if we want to grow our schools. So that's all. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Heather.
So if anyone has some additional questions or comments that they'd like to submit, please send them to Crystal Carvo regarding the secondary school issues. And now we'll kind of turn to our elementary task force. Maybe we'll take a 2-minute stretch break here while we set up for that. And Lindsay Bertram is going to be leading us through that.
Well, but I mean, they're done with the high school discussion, we're now going to do elementary.
Yes, Jim.
Oh, the trip, right.
I don't know, I want to sign up for the dystopian literature class. I know. We're living in a dystopian world.
This teaching high school. Very bad.
So would you like to swap some spots?
Whatever is convenient. I don't know.
I can take direction from you from there, so if you want to just say next slide, I'll just plug you through.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great, yeah. You and I have simpatico, we can do this.
That's because you can make money. It has nothing to do with the desire not to live here. It has to all with the almighty dollar.
But it's a different beast.
Some of those biggest concerns versus wages, taxes. Got chocolate almonds.
Oh, I like those.
There it is. There it is.
We get those.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
She said I can, we really need to active voter interview.
Heard about it.
Well, so one instance,
Amazing.
So they interviewed a teacher over her administrator.
Okay, if we can finish up our conversation, we'll jump back in here.
What's in there?
Thank you. She brought those. Do you want almond chocolate?
Yes.
I texted Leanna, I was like, we're gonna do chocolate tonight.
Thank you.
All right, with everybody grab a seat, please, and we'll hear from our elementary task force, and Lindsay, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, goody. Right here, put that mic right here.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, because you're awfully quiet.
No one's gonna be able to hear me.
You're here?
Okay, are we ready? All right. So I'm going to present the elementary task force committee work. Let's hit that first slide. All right, so our committee was made up of 10 members. We had community members, teachers, administrators, board members. In addition to those 10 actual committee members, we had many other people of all of these things that came and went and participated in our meetings. We had a very similar charge to the high school, but obviously with the elementary school slightly different. Looking at what do we have to work with, what are we looking to do with what we have, and what are we trying to solve, what problems are we trying to solve. So next slide, I think. So the problem that we are trying to tackle is that currently in our district, education delivery is not equitable between all of the students in our district. Along with social emotional opportunities. Obviously, we all know about the declining enrollment. We've heard about the inefficiencies within our district resources, and again, perception of our schools among prospective new residents and trying to grow our communities. Next slide. Maybe.
It's trying.
We also have a delay issue. The next slide, I think, is going to be a map. This is a really awesome map. Get ready, you're going to love it. It's going to blow your mind. Basically, it's going to show you we're a really big district.
Too ready.
It's probably going to, hey, there it is. Blew your mind, right? Look at that. So we're a really big district. It is very spread out, but every student that lives within that gigantic range is equally important. So there's a weird echo. That is the important thing to remember, is that we are all of these people. And I know that some of us come from Jamaica, and some of us come from Townsend, and some of us come from Newfane. But as a resident of Newfane, it is just as important to me what happens to the students that live in Jamaica and what happens to the students that live in Townsend, because that's where we're at. So that's cool. Go to the next one. So the committee came up with 3 possible short-term solutions. The first one being more or less a status quo where we continue to run 3 K-5 schools. The next was consolidating into 2 K-5s. And the third option is to run 1 K-2 school and 1 3-5 school. So these came about from looking at previous work that had been done and trying to decide. Do you want to add something?
I was just going to say that one of the things that we made a very conscious choice of in our committee was to separate the sites from these solutions. So we didn't talk, when we talked about 2 K-5s, we didn't talk about which buildings they were. And the reason why we did that is because we all know that there's a lot of emotion in which building. And so we wanted to look at, well, how would our delivery of education to the kids and our delivery of service to the families, how would that change based upon the number of buildings? And Lindsay and I, we really did spend a lot of time planning on how we were going to use these 6 meetings. And that was one of the overt choices we made, was to talk about the buildings in one spot, but really mostly be talking about these kind of solutions. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That's an important point, is that we were trying to keep everyone's personal emotions out of the conversation and work towards finding solutions that, if we're running 2 K-5s, yes, there's going to be some implication about where they are. But the big picture is that it's 2 K-5s, right? And then the other thing that's important to note, I think, is that as a committee, with such a short amount of time frame, we knew that there's no possible way we're gonna sit down and be like, boom, there's one answer, we got it. There's no more talk about any of it. We've got a consensus. Obviously, it's a bigger problem than that. So we decided to take an approach where we would put the information out there in a comparison between these 3 scenarios, so that everyone can sort of understand what it means for each of those scenarios, and leave it up to the board. So go ahead and, all right, so the first sort of category that we put in the comparison is the grade configuration. So obviously 3 K-5 schools is basically what's happening now. It's exactly what's happening now. The 2 K-5 schools, again, we didn't talk about locations for that, but doing 2 K-5 schools would allow more equity in the education delivery, so that class sizes and education opportunities are more equal among all of the students in our district. Also, when we talked about K-2 and a 3-5 school, that also maybe even better with 2 single grade classrooms at each grade level. But obviously then there's some cons that go along with that, with having children at more than one school at the same time in the elementary school. So I'm not going to necessarily read every bullet because we only have a few minutes, but this will be up on the website so everyone can go through it more closely. Go ahead to the next one. All right, so teacher collaboration. Obviously, we know what's happening right now with 3 K-5 schools. When we did our surveys, teachers talked a lot about wanting more collaboration time amongst similar grade banding groups within the whole district. So currently, it is a difficult thing to achieve. We're doing some work towards that, but it is difficult. 2 K-5 schools obviously allows a little bit more flexibility with that. A K-2 and a 3-5, when you have 2 classrooms of the same grade level next to each other in the same building, is sort of the maximum amount of collaboration possible. That's the summary of that, I guess. Educational opportunities, again, with 3 K-5 schools, there's much different access to core curriculum and tiered student support services. What you get at one school is very different than what you get at another in terms of the level of individualization that you can get. And class sizes and all of that are very different amongst the schools right now. So when we have 2 K through 5s, those things even out a little bit. And there's a little bit more opportunity for flexibility and a little more equal access to all of the educational opportunities. When you run a K2 and a 3-5, again, with 2 classrooms next to each other in the same building, there's, educational benefits to that. And it, allows an even wider social circle potentially for age-specific groupings. Again, all of these things also have cons. So there's a lot of conversation to be had there still.
And if I could pipe in, another thing that we talked about with a K-2 and a 3-5, and that banding and what it would do to have 2 third-grade classrooms under one roof, it would mean that we could balance the classes socially, we could blend them academically. Like, there were a lot of real pluses that educators were really interested in with those configurations. We also could, if we have a particularly large kindergarten coming into Newbrook right now, there's really not very much we can do about it. Where if we had the 2 kindergartens in one place, we would even them out number-wise as well.
So again, with classroom teachers, there is a potential to slightly reduce admin and teaching costs when you start consolidating. And there's the availability of teachers being able to be assigned to different locations much easier. So there's a gain there when as you start to consolidate. Go ahead. And the school and community comparison. So this one's hard. So right now there's a very strong sense of community in each building. That exists and it's wonderful, right? So there's no work to be done on that. Whereas as you start to consolidate, now you're starting to need to redevelop that sense of community. And it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that it's work to do it. Again, with the 3 K through 5s, the teachers are able to establish relationships with students prior to having the student in the classroom, which is really great. It's a shorter bus route. Things are close to home. And that has a huge impact on families. As you start to consolidate 2 K through 5 schools, again, teachers are still able to establish that relationship as they're K through 5 in the same building, which you don't necessarily have once you do a K2 and a 3-5 situation. The 2 K through 5 schools would result in potentially longer bus routes for some, shorter for some potentially. But again, when you have 2 schools, you can sort of split the distance. Whereas when you have 1 K through 2 and 1 3 through 5 school, everybody goes to one school and then everybody goes to another. And at some point, everybody's gonna have to be traveling real far. We look back at that original map and it reminds you how far it is to go between our people that live on the outlying edges. So it would also add an additional transition year for students during the elementary years, which is difficult for students, can be difficult for students. And then I just, again, with the sense of community in the K2 and the 3-5 schools, grade banding would really need to be redeveloped. Okay. So we didn't really get into preschool in those previous slides. We basically, as a committee, kept that as a separate conversation because the board has yet to make a decision about what we want to do with that. And it's gone both ways. So we basically decided to keep it separate. And we just basically listed out what are the possibilities for preschool with each of those scenarios. And if you have 3 K through 5s, you could run a centralized location at Townsend, which is similar to what we're doing now, or we could potentially offer pre-K within the community. If we have 2 K through 5 schools, maybe you have a pre-K centralized in a third location, or each town could offer pre-K within the community, or maybe there's a pre-K based in each of the 2 schools. So there's a lot of options. Same thing with if you use a grade banding version. There are lots of choices for preschool. We just, as a board, need to decide how we feel about it and what our priorities are on it, really. So the important things that we wanted to make sure to reiterate is the travel barrier is very significant, and getting from one end of the district to the other is a big deal. So also the board has a tough decision to make, and it's definitely not going to completely please everyone. And so no matter what happens, I think everyone just needs to put on their big kid pants. So another thing is that we really need to look for small wins. There's a lot of things that everybody agrees on. Even though it seems like nobody agrees on anything, there's a lot of things that everybody can get behind. And the more of those things that we can put together, the easier it's going to be for everybody to get on board with whatever it is we choose to do. Little things like lots of outdoor time for students, not just littles, but even bigs. There's a lot of little wins, and just looking for those as much as possible is going to keep people in the process. We think it's really important to consider maintaining a community center of some sort within each town, regardless of what else happens. And we talked a lot about using the short-term solutions that we just talked about while we are further studying and implementing a bigger long-term solution, which we discussed. Yes?
Can I add one thing to the summary?
Yes.
We also talked about having the school board not silo themselves in a way that, in order to have these things work, the board needs to start communicating with the planning commissions in all of the towns, as well as the town governments. So having conversations between your boards and those boards would be really helpful in helping the community make the transitions that are needed.
Thanks. So, as we talked about long-term solutions, we also spent a chunk of time looking at a single campus solution. And so we basically used the same comparison with a long-term solution of a single campus. So how that looks for grade configurations is that you do end up with 2 single grade classrooms in the same building right next to each other. You have the maximum amount of flexibility, and you keep all of your students in the same school. So you don't have people bouncing oh, we're gonna pick up this student over here, and then we're gonna pick up this student over here, and then we're gonna come back and pick up this student here. It can get very complicated as a family trying to just do the logistics of life. Also, you get the flexibility for more balanced class sizes. As far as educational opportunities, that would allow the maximum amount of access to core curriculum and tiered student support services, the most amount of equitable opportunities. The larger grade level groups are going to mean that you are going to have more diversity within your student population. It's easier for before and after school programming. And so you sort of get the most pros with maybe the least cons. That's a conversation the board can have. For classroom teachers, obviously there will be those efficiencies from having multiple classrooms in the same building. It's unlikely, hopefully, despite our declining enrollment, that we would need multi-graded classrooms. And we would be able to maximize our current specialist staff. Again, teacher collaboration obviously would be improved. And the balancing of social emotional issues within classrooms would be much easier, greater opportunity for collaborative planning, and again, more consistency in curriculum instruction and assessment. So all of these things are going to be a lot more balanced and equitable.
Also from a managerial standpoint, if you have 2 third grade teachers and one of them retires, you'll be able to bring someone in and have a natural mentor right across the hall. Someone who knows all the ropes, not only of the curriculum, but also the children and families, the culture of the school. And so that was another thing that we thought would be a real plus to come out of this kind of a longer term plan.
So with the school and community, we talked about more families being connected to the school would likely result in, the most number of people being willing to participate in the school buildings. If you had 5 from what was previously each of 3 different places, and now you have 15 in one place, that, whatever that actual number is. Again, it more efficiently foster a single school and staff culture, because we are one district and every student is equal within our district. All of the teachers would be able to establish relationships with students prior to having them in their classroom, and also keep them afterwards, right? You get to maintain that relationship afterwards because it's a single campus, so as you're moving through. And then again, preschool, however the board chooses to address preschool, there are certainly options with that, but having students in one place makes services and everything else much more efficient. So the big idea is that long-term conversation needs to happen right away. And we need to talk about the feasibility study. We don't know whether that means a new building or using existing facilities, but to have that conversation about what it means. And we talked about how central location to that single campus is critical because of the travel distances. Go ahead.
I wanted to take a second just to remind folks, and it was before my time, so I'm not bragging. It was not before Ken's time, though. There was a time about 8 years ago when we were a single board at Newbrook. And that came about through the hard work of the people of Brookline and Newfane as they combined. What they actually did was they watched the firefighters combine. So the Brookline Fire Department and the Newfane Fire Department combined, and they found an efficiency that it was seamless. And the schools, I think, followed suit. And I wasn't there for it, but I think that's what happened. And the schools followed suit. We now have the school building in Brookline is in use by a private provider, pre-K provider, and we have all of the children at Newbrook right now. And I just wanted that to be in the board's mind as you're making these hard decisions, because it really is, it really does take like that shift where you kind of have to like let your biases go and think about what it could be like in the future. Because we would have real opportunities for efficiencies and equity that we do not have now by getting the children together or reconfiguring. And that is a real positive thing. And I think that the staff would be energized. I certainly would be energized by it. But it is hard to make those kind of changes. So I just wanted to say that, Ken, thank you for doing what you did. When I took over as principal at Newbrook, we were operating at $200 per kid over the state average, which was a great price for what was happening at our school and for the services that we provided. So I just wanted to keep in mind that we can do this. This is not an impossible task. We just all need to recognize that this group is so diverse that everyone's opinions are going to be a little different, and that you guys are, as your representative, as the representative council of the public, you guys are going to have to come to terms with all those opinions and then make a choice like they did at Newfane and Brookline, which did benefit everyone. And if I was to ask, there would probably be families in Brookline that would say it's terrible. That would say that hey, we have to drive a lot further. But when you look at the map, the families way out here in East Newfane, all the way over by Route 9. I mean, they've got a long way to go. So it'll never please everyone, but it really is worth it. It is worth it. And if we could lower the taxes a little bit for people, maybe we can help with this housing problem. Because I agree with Heather Sperling. I think the biggest issue we have right now is that people cannot afford to rent here. I think that's the biggest issue. Thank you for hearing me out.
I also wanted to add that, similar to the point that Bob had made earlier, is that there was also a discussion in our committee about the future of our district makeup, whether or not we want to change what our district looks like, and whether it should include Jamaica. Would they want to be, removed from our district? And for the board to just know that came up, and whether or not the board can decide what they would like to do with that information, I guess. So we had a lot of conversations and didn't really come up with a consensus, but have a lot more in common than we thought we did.
Well, thank you, Lindsay and Scotty. So let's, again, ask some questions first, and then we'll have some discussion. So first, within the board, questions for the task force?
Oh, I guess I'll go first.
Don't be shy, Ken.
Poor grizzly bear waking up from hibernation.
Where's the salmon? I love the fact that you came at this with no emotion. You didn't name buildings. I think that's great. So that leaves you one option, that you're going to have to go with all pure logic. It is doable. I like it. And you can close a school and make most people happy at the elementary school level. Newbrook proved that, and that was the people, that was the townspeople that came out, and I think we did it in less than 2 years.
You did do it until.
And we first started talking about, well, how much can we save if we buy more toilet paper in bulk? I mean, that's how we that's where we started at, is where will we save money? Will we save a penny per roll? Will we, and it just, in less than 2 years, finally the townspeople stood up at one of our meetings and said, why don't we just close the school? Let's just have a vote. And we set up a vote, and the town decided they wanted to close their school and join and make it Newbrook, and I think it worked out beautifully. And we had a great board. Both boards worked together from each school at the time, and it was a no-brainer. We shared a post office, we shared a fire department, we share a zip code. Let's share a school, and that was their attitude.
So Ken, I just played Jeopardy with your comment, and I wrote it as a question here: do long-term gains outweigh short-term challenges?
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
I think you've given us a good.
But it can be a great thing. If it's done logically.
Can I piggyback onto what Ken said?
Please do.
The way it was done, the teachers and the students came from Brookline and joined Newbrook. So that is I think that was a huge factor, so that when the children came from Brookline, they had those teachers that they had grown up with, and those teachers joined us.
But that was all luck of the draw, because we had certain people retiring at certain times, and it just
that was the thing that they talked about.
Right, but it just happened to work out really well.
Would be able to join us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the board?
Other questions for the task force?
I see nobody else from the board, so I guess we can move it out. Chrissy.
So I was on the elementary education committee. And one of the things in the beginning of the presentation, the 3 K through 5s, the 2 K through 5s, and the K through 2 and 3 through 5 models were presented as short-term solutions, but I don't recall in our committee meetings discussing those as short-term solutions with the end goal being a one-campus model.
We didn't discuss it.
So yeah, just to clarify, I didn't necessarily mean for it to come across that way. The one campus is a long-term solution. The other solutions can be short-term solutions, but one campus cannot be a short-term solution because it requires a feasibility that we have not approached. So there is absolutely no way that we can do one campus by budget season. Like, that requires a big feasibility.
But the short-term solutions can be long-term solutions.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily just short-term.
And that's how
So
we
I just want to make that clear to everybody who wasn't on the committee, that those aren't just short-term solutions. I also wanted to point out, it was on the bottom of one of the slides, but I just wanted to make sure it was seen and heard by everybody. Under our current busing company, 3-year-olds cannot ride the bus. So I guess state law they can, but under our busing company they can't. So if we consolidate pre-Ks into 1 or 2 locations, there might be a difficulty with getting 3-year-olds to that location. It was discussed in the committee that there are some 3-year-olds in Jamaica that are not attending pre-K because of lack of transportation, because they can't get to Townsend and they can't afford to go to a private pre-K somewhere else. And then the last comment I wanted to make for now is on the Newfane Brookline merger. I don't think that's a great comparison here, because that was 2 towns, Brookline merging into the Newbrook school. That town got to make that choice, whereas here it's district wide. So our district is going to make the choice for all the towns in it. So one town may not want to make that choice, but they're going to be forced into it anyway.
Go ahead, solve that one.
Go to the vote. I believe it was Article 11, was it? When this.
Yeah, we cannot.
We cannot close a school unless the town that the school is closing in has a positive vote to close the school by that town. In other words, if they wanted to close Newbrook School, actually that's going to be the hard one, but you'd have to go Newfane and Brookline would be, all those voters would have to vote to close that school.
We had the Wyndham vote.
But under what was discussed under like long-term planning last year was this one campus model with Jamaica possibly being I forget what the words were. Immersive Learning Center. So in that case, would there be a vote to close the school, or it's still being used for education, so we wouldn't get to vote?
That would have been, under that model, would have still been used for education.
So that would have been Jamaica being forced into, or possibly Newfane and Brookline being forced into having to merge into something they don't want to merge into. So it's a different situation.
You know, if I can comment, I know what you mean, and thank you for bringing this up. The reason why I brought it up, the merge, was not as much about the logistics of how it happened, but more about the end result of what a merge can do for an area, which is to bring down costs, to make equity a reality in the schools, and to allow parents to know that, hey, my son or daughter is going to find somebody who they want to be best friends with, like that's more likely, right? And those are the kinds of things that we were more talking about. Because of the size of these schools, some of them get so small that it's sometimes hard socially. And those are the things I think about a lot, just in my day-to-day work. So I wasn't more talking about the logistics as much as just the student experience.
Well, no, students gained from that also, so.
Yeah.
It was close. The towns are so close to each other.
Right, yeah.
Right.
I'm just wondering if we should try to find some clarity on the Jamaica issue, right? Because Jamaica's been a good neighbor and part of our district, so we want to try to make sure that the people of Jamaica are represented and happy. I have read some things, and I'm not fully up to date, but the things I've read have given me the impression that the state has made it harder to leave a newly merged district, because there were some districts that split off and some towns that split off. So we, at the board level, should at least have some clarity for the people of Jamaica of what that would entail, and if it's even possible at this point. That's my 2 cents.
I had heard some legislation that's coming in 5 years that would make it easier.
In 5 years.
The mergers were having issues because the mergers
That's not
were
legislation.
No, but they were talking about it at the AOE board, state board meeting, that the mergers weren't going so well.
Right.
There was some dissatisfaction within the state that they might free it up so they didn't have a rebellion.
Good, Patty.
So we'll find in 5 years.
I want to go back to this
Yeah.
comparison of the Newbrook thing and Jamaica. There's really no comparison, none whatsoever. Jamaica, number one, Jamaica's size is totally different. We have a town, we have a real town. We have a store, we have a church, we have.
Not a town.
No, but we have, it's not like Brookline didn't have a store that I know
Right,
of.
no, we didn't.
Yeah.
All they had was the town office and the
Right,
school.
and we're a point of stopping for people. It's a totally different thing. It's like comparing us with Athens. They're totally different. And before Act 46, Jamaica had 50 or 60 kids. We were a thriving, vital school. And all of a sudden, we've got nothing. How does that happen? And so this is nothing like any of those mergers, nothing. So I want to make sure everybody thinks, oh yeah, it'll go along nice and everybody will be happy. There's some big issues that have happened to put Jamaica where it is.
In response to your comments, sir, I suggest that this board take our meetings and go, all of you, en masse, to Jamaica and have a public interaction talk. Because it sounds to me as an outsider that Jamaica has a view and you folks have a view. And you'll survey them and they'll talk to you, but you won't be able to make ends meet. So if you go and have a face-to-face conversation like a strategy session or a vote, you might actually get to the bottom and solve your problem.
I don't think there's a problem between this board and Jamaica. I will say one thing, I don't think that's fair to turn around and say that, Patty, I'm sorry, but you can't turn around and say, well, we have a store, so we're considered a real town, because just because do you have an opera house?
No, it's.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, so then you're not a real town.
We are
Okay, but no, that's not fair to my neighbors in Jamaica. I'm just saying, okay? You can't just say they're not a real town, it went over smoother, I don't like that. Here's the logistics, okay? And the logistics are, if we were a single district, it would be a completely different story if we were all single districts again, and your cost per pupil was through the roof. Then we'd see who'd be yelling what in town about if we want our school closed or if we don't. I personally agree that taking a school and turning it into a immersive learning center instead of having it be K through 5 like the other schools, I personally feel that's a way of getting around what was built on, one of the bricks that was built on that says the town has to close the school. I would think that this board would have enough honesty to turn around and say, well, we're gonna go around the interpretation of closing we're taking all the students out and they can come back for one subject once a week to utilize that building because I know we went through this thing, closing a school, the quotation's closing, the legal term of closing a school means the doors are locked to any student for education.
Well, then Jamaica takes it back.
So, yeah, well, but it's not closed if it's an immersive learning center. So you don't get a vote, is how the legal term closed would be. But I would think this board would be open-minded enough to any town that if it came to a decision that we want to close Newbrook, we want to close Jamaica, we want to close Townsend, we have, or we want to turn it into something other than a K through whatever. They would go to that town and ask for, I would hope the board would have the courtesy to do that.
If I could interject here, I think that the board and community all have expressed a great deal of respect for every community and every family living within this community, and are seeking solutions that are going to serve the most folks in the best possible ways. The elementary task force stated that they wanted to separate the model discussion from the building discussion because there are different ways of approaching that, and that could be a second stage of this conversation. And with a little bit of discipline, I think it can be done in the logical way that Mr. McFadden suggested that we approach it. But I would hope that everybody in the room would understand that there's great concern for the issues that are specific to Jamaica, as there are for the rest of the district.
Thank you.
Fiona.
Two things. One is I'm going to be leading the community outreach for this. And what would be really helpful is to know what questions you would like feedback on and specifics. Like you were talking about, people were talking about choice, but you didn't have the specifics you needed to be able to say what they meant, right? So it would be really helpful to get from you what specifics would you like from the feedback? That would be helpful for me when I'm facilitating those conversations. The second thing is that I'm through the work with the elementary task force, I'm going to be putting together a survey that's going to be for the issue of wanting to know where people are at, specifically for parents of kids, of school-age kids, K through 12 for the last 10 years, asking demographic questions, asking what schools they chose to go to and why they chose to go to those schools, whether they stayed in district or out of district and the reasons why, and if they chose to educate elsewhere, what would bring them back. Because one thing I was noticing in the elementary task force is we didn't have data. We had our own personal subsets of communities that we were involved with to know why people were sending their kids to the red district or not, but no overarching data to say what percentage of kids that live in this area go to our schools, people that left this area, was schools a factor in leaving this area, all of that kind of information. And Peter's gonna be getting me data, all of the email addresses for the adults of our kids in our school district, so I can send that information there. And then for the folks that haven't gone to our schools, we're gonna have to go find that elsewhere. But I'm gonna go through Front Porch Forum and just kind of spread the word out. And so my goal is to get that started by the end of the school year, and to have a month so that by your next meeting, that information will be in. So hopefully, I mean, it's not gonna be perfect, but that will be some more information to go with.
So you've heard some of the things that Fiona is thinking about, including in that, and any additional ideas, questions, information that would be helpful to you, please contact her directly. That'll find its way in. Thank you.
Thank you. Renee?
Hey, good evening. I just had a question regarding the closing of Jamaica. Is it also a possibility that Jamaica would be offered the vote or decision to leave the school district?
Again, I think they'd have to organize that on their own, wouldn't they?
Yes, they would. They would have to start.
I was just, I am a family with a preschooler that we moved here to be part of the Townsend community. So, and of course, as we have discussed, that the cost of living and rentals are extremely high, and the closest we could find would be Jamaica. So our child could go there. So it would just be concerning if Jamaica were to want to remove themselves entirely from the district.
Thanks, Renee. Yep.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Karen, excuse me, Karen Am from Jamaica. It's talk like that that is really hurting Jamaica. People are not wanting to even attempt to come to Jamaica because they keep hearing that there's a possibility that the school is closing. And it's hurting. And then losing our pre-K license, pre-K license was
devastating.
Yeah, it was horrible. I wonder if maybe another option might be to offer school choice to high school across all our towns here, across our district. And not be afraid of that, thinking that everybody would be going to Burton. But it would attract a lot of people and certainly attract a lot of grade school kids. And maybe it would strengthen our elementary schools. And the stronger we become here at Leland and Gray, more people would just continue on there. But if we offered choice, then people would be moving into our towns. Instead of, we were just looking at Zillow that said, if you're moving to this area, Leland and Gray is a 4 out of 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to move here with your children with that? Well, I know.
I only did because I was homeschooling.
But somebody new from out of state who has no connections to Leland and Gray, they're not going to come. So if we were to offer it.
Yeah. Okay.
Karen, just to respond to you, I've reached out because I have, through my work, I have connection with several realtors in the area. So actually I just reached out with one recently mentioning that. And now I can't say that it's not the reason. And if you look at the specifics on those, like the one that Zillow uses, some of that for the rating is because we are a small, less diverse in some ways community that's pushing our scores down. So that's something to keep in mind. Unless you click on that, you don't know it. But what she was saying is that's never once come up with any of her house sales, and she's been selling a few lately. The bigger concerns people have are the cost of livings in the area versus what the wages are, taxes, lack of, like how far you have to travel to get to any community activities really, or, you know, concerts and shopping and
groceries.
Yeah, groceries.
Theater.
Yeah, all of that, culture, exactly, Joe.
Dining.
So I just did want to point that out. She actually says a lot of people love our schools. They love our farm to table. They love that they're in small communities where they can make those connections. So that doesn't, at least in her experience, our school's reputation are not a deterrent for the area.
But we just heard it from one person on there, and those of us living in Jamaica hear it all the time.
Hear it.
And have heard it from realtors.
I know several families right now that are looking to move. They live in Win Hall, Londonderry, that area. They're looking to move. They're looking to buy a house. They will not look at Jamaica because of the schools.
Maybe
They said, oh, you guys are considering school choice. That is great because that would open up Jamaica to our house search. But if we don't have it, they're not coming here.
I was gonna say Burton's got an anti-Leland and Gray ad out there. It's our PR, but I'm just throwing it out there because, you know, we don't pay tuition to the kids. That's the biggest thing. They want school choice, they want Burton, but they gotta afford it on their own. Tuition, if we had school choice and we paid the tuition, everybody'd be on board with it. Is that true or not?
So to follow up on what you're saying, everybody thinks Jamaica residents just want Burton.
Do they?
What other school do we have for Jamaica to go to? We have here,
Green Mountain.
that's
Good.
45
Vermont
minutes from
Academy.
my house.
On Academy.
That's
Twin
45
Valley.
minutes from my house.
Twin Valley.
That's probably 40 minutes from my house. I mean, Jamaica does not have the options that Newfane and Brookline and Town. It's easier to get to Brattleboro from here. It's closer to get to Brattleboro from here. Or Putney. Jamaica doesn't have that many options. So our options are Leland and Gray or Burton.
It's not going to address the point you're raising, but there was a comment earlier that said that JVS had an enrollment of 50 or 60 not that long ago. Maybe one of the important things that we could probe through the survey is why.
School choice.
Why folks,
choice.
why did folks make those choices?
But why did they make those choices to come bring their kids here? To go down, convenience, travel? They work in Brattleboro?
We've got some hands in, out in Zoom, sorry. Let's go with Luella and then Sally.
Luella Stratner?
Thank you. I don't know that woman's name who just spoke, but I really liked that idea of putting choice in terms of tuition on the table for families that want it, because many families will not choose that. And my understanding is that the tuition is only a portion of, what the town can provide is a small portion of what it actually costs to go to any of those schools. Obviously, BBA is a whole thing with specific towns and blah, blah, blah. We could look into partnering with Vermont Academy, which is a gorgeous school. I think they could use some more enrollment numbers. Maybe they would give us a deal with, they would take our town money, whatever the amount is we're paying per pupil, and allow our students to go there at the tuition rate. That's an idea. The other idea is put the elementary school in Jamaica. There's a ton of land. There's room to grow. There's much better outdoor space for children than at the Townsend Elementary School. And then, shuffle things around in a different way. If you go through logic and you look at just numbers and data and space and all of that kind of stuff, I think the logistics of the two school model, whether it's two K through 5s or a K through whatever in the next levels, there's getting rid of, like you did in the presentation, which was very clever, to remove town names and school names and just look at square footage, property, like resources, all of that. Travel times, if you put the two little kid schools at either end of the district, then that should make travel time pretty equidistant for all the families. I think that's a good thing to look into. And obviously there's a lot more conversation here with Jamaica in terms of how the town is feeling about being part of a district. I think that is an important conversation that needs to happen. More information is needed for sure, but by putting that choice as an option, and not like, we'll pay $60,000 for you to go to SMS. No, we'll give you $17,000 or $18,000, and you can put it towards whatever tuition in the county or in the state that you want. That would be a very different, different conversation. I don't know if that's legally possible, but that'd be great.
Thanks, Will. Go ahead, Sally.
Hi there. Sorry for my non-picture. Hi, I'm Sally Simpson. I live in Jamaica. I used to live in Wynn Hall and moved to Jamaica about 15 years ago. My children are not in the school system. They're old. I have grandchildren. I just am here as an advocate for school choice. I am very involved in the Wynn Hall area. And school choice does bring about competition within the schools. And competition is a good thing. It makes all the schools be their best to recruit those students. And it's a win-win for everyone. And it's been a hard-fought battle in the town of Wynn Hall and the town of Stratton to keep school choice. It's unique for our area, and it does bring new blood into the area. It improves the schools. It helps everyone do their best because we want to do our best and have the best schools. I just think that this conversation about school choice, particularly in the town of Jamaica, has gone on for so many years. And I'm just going to put in my 2 cents that I live in Jamaica. I'm a grandmother. None of my kids are in the school system. And I would really, really love to see school choice happen for the town of Jamaica. And I just want to also say, thanks so much. I know how difficult it is to be on a board. You guys are doing the greatest work. It's a very difficult situation to try to please everyone. But I see that you're very thoughtful and you're going to try to make the best choice for everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sally. Leslie, we want to cut it off for?
Yeah, I think this is a good place for us to stop. And again, if you have some additional questions specific to the elementary report, direct those to Leanne Gilson, and Leanne will make sure that everybody gets access to that. So the next step is to take the show on the road and have the task force reports presented to the community and invite people in to provide some additional feedback. Fiona Chevalier has volunteered to help coordinate that, and Fiona has already set up some of the sessions to get feedback around futures protocol. And Suzanne Paw, who couldn't be here tonight, is going to be sending out a press release after this meeting to the recorder and a few other outlets with information and make sure that all of the reports are available publicly on the website for everyone. But if these meetings could then be held during the month of June, and that feedback brought to the next board meeting on July 11th, that would allow the board to kind of add onto the work that's been done. So logistically for that, Fiona, you're volunteering to help arrange that. Is there anyone from the board who can work directly with our Dana?
Yeah.
Thank you. Those meetings will have to be facilitated, and the board, the representatives of the task force will have to be involved in the presentation. So who would be the right folks to do that presentation? Will we ask? Well, I don't want to volunteer anymore.
What?
We do it?
I do it, yeah. I'm getting there, percent.
Why can't the slideshows be narrated in advance of the community meeting so neither person you don't want to volunteer has to come? It can just play like a media thing, like a movie.
That would also be helpful for folks to watch because
Right.
you need to digest things to be able to give really good feedback, and to do that, to have that prior so that people could digest it.
I think
would
we
be
already
really
have the
good.
narration. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
so
just take
people
a
already
snippet,
gave a
Cut and
presentation.
paste.
Just do it in advance and play it.
Could spend the whole community time getting feedback.
Right.
Don't even give the
And you could
presentation.
run Saturday after church
Expectation
or
is you
every
watch them
Monday,
before you show
after
up.
meeting, or-
Great.
and then have a meeting and have a talk.
We could show the video at the beginning of the meeting, at like, we're gonna show the video from this time to this time, and then we're gonna discuss afterwards, so that folks wanna watch it right beforehand, or folks that,
Or even have it on a community time that the community gets together normally after church or, before town meeting, or I don't know. And then have a separate just for the talk. Doesn't all have to be on the same day.
Might work as a refresher.
As a what?
A refresher.
There you go.
So I think it's still important to have board members commit to representing the board at those meetings. So did I see a couple of hands come up?
I will put out there to the rest of my fellow board members that I'm feeling wildly maxed out after this last committee work. And if anybody else was willing to step up, I'm currently missing my daughter's playoff game to give this presentation tonight, so I would like to not volunteer for that if possible.
We don't want a quorum of the board, and we're not actually speaking for the board, we're just there to represent. and
It's just to answer
carry
questions.
things.
Yeah, so
Before
answer-
presentation.
And we have the video of the presentation already narrated.
You already did it tonight,
Yeah.
right?
Right, and we can clip those and YouTube them and whatever. Depending on when, I mean, if it doesn't conflict with any of the other things I can't say no to, I'll go.
Yeah, I can do it.
And then we should probably have BCTV there to also have a video of that. Do anything better?
But if I know what
If you have that to other people.
Well, then if it's not a board meeting, we're gonna figure out how to just come together and pay for it. And these are community meetings that we're gonna go to and show up, and we'll just pay the BCTV fee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who's
How
going to
many
join
meetings
Joe?
are we gonna have?
Just two, right?
How many? Those?
Then where will
Those.
they be?
Not here.
Hmm?
Not here.
Not
They should be in the community where the community meets.
Right.
Dana, are you willing
Not
to
Well,
present at the meetings?
I think
or not?
Have
Yeah.
one in Jamaica, have one down in Newbrook.
There you go.
Reach out to the other ends of our universe.
Yeah.
Because this is easy for Townsend people to do.
Do we do it at the school? Scotty,
Yeah.
you have command of both schools?
Kind of. Yes, we could certainly arrange that.
And I think it's important for you to think about when you're going to have them, because it concerns me that a lot of things are going to be happening in July and August, which that's when people are not around.
That's why we were crashing it in June.
The goal is to do it one of the last 2 weeks of June, and we can make sure that one of them, what we did last time was we had 3 different ones in 3 different locations at 3 different times. We had an evening, we had an afternoon, and we had a weekend.
Town hall in Jamaica, you have to
so-
get rental and we own the schools, so.
Fiona, do you have any times or dates in mind?
Yeah.
So is Joe on his own here?
If you can make it. Right, Joe?
Well, this afternoon thing is gonna get interesting. But yeah, I mean, I'll go to the evening one, and the weekend is also very interesting. I have elderly parents in Maine that I go to every weekend now.
Well, I can represent the board.
So,
The board don't mind.
No, absolutely. So.
I'd also be happy to facilitate the meetings.
Bob, thank you so much.
We can work team. Is Luella on the team?
Thanks, Bob.
I'll talk to her about that. I think it would be, I know Suzanne will be, I can talk to Suzanne and Luella to see about the facilitation and see our schedules. Can I send out a doodle of like times that I'm available, but then we could kind of go from there rather than taking up all the time.
Yeah, you're like, you're very different than this one.
Yeah, could you do me a favor and just send out the doodle to everybody on the board? I mean, because I want to volunteer, but an afternoon's probably not gonna work for me, but if it's a feasible time,
Yeah.
gladly.
I'll put out a bunch of different times and a bunch of different dates.
Sounds good.
And we can set up a feedback mechanism for people who can't come to the meeting to an opportunity to submit their ideas.
You can do a similar mural board or something like that.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody, and particularly members of the task force, who had those presentations tonight, and everybody for the really important probing questions that you asked and the great ideas that have been floated tonight. Great work, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I do have one question for our gentleman here at BCTV. Is it possible to splice those videos out so that we can upload those to WRED.org?
Of the 2 presentations
Yeah.
tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can look into it.
Okay,
Thank
That'd
you.
be great. Yeah. All right, great. I don't think we have any old business.
Yes, we do.
We got one.
We have one?
Wait, go ahead.
Approved minutes.
Yep. We missed minutes.
Oh, apologies.
business.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 2nd.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Second.
Oh, I can't have the glory.
Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, and I will take that final motion.
All right, I'll make it. Motion to adjourn.
Dana, get it.
Second it.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.